and there's your warning. But thank you guys for joining us today. It's a small class, but it's a good one for us to get started with doing these repair Zooms. So this is the musical strings and things. I'm not sure where that name come from. It was just in my head. So no relation to a store in Denver that apparently existed. But we are going to talk about stringed instruments and restringing your instruments, how to maintain them. Yeah, I'm just excited because we're trying out this new kind of model where we're doing a Zoom session to cover repair and then maybe let you guys do the repairs on your own. Give a little more background here. This series is a partnership with the City of Federal Way, King County Department of Natural Resources, and awesome young lady, the recycling project manager for the city, Jeanette Brizendine, is also very active in planning these. There she is. There we go. And I am your host slash wizard of tech and so on and so forth. My name is Amanda Miller. I'm the executive director of the South King Tool Library, like your screen says now. We foster the idea of sharing, training, and empowering our community to make the changes that they want to see happen. And we lend things like tools, offer training and education, and sorry, hold on. What is it? Sharing tools and information, offer training and education, and then empower the community. So let me see. If you haven't heard of the Tool Library, I really encourage you guys to come down and check us out, but I probably have if you're joining us today. So without more delay, unless there is more delay on my computer side, I'm gonna wait for my screen to advance. Yeah, there we go. Oh, slideshows are the worst. Let's go. Oh yeah, okay. All right, so I'm really proud and happy to introduce our teacher and leader here of this workshop, John Herman. He is a local Federal Way resident, a Denver native, but a lifelong musician, multi-instrumentalist. He's been in several national touring bands like S407, The Fourth, The Quiet Ones, Seattle-based bands, Steradian, Scriptures, Hand of the Hills. He's currently the manager of the Trading Musician in North Seattle. He's also a great dad and a pretty good kisser. He's my husband, so I can say those things. But yeah, I'm just really proud of him for everything he's done, and he's a great adventure musician when it comes to his experience. So, John, was there anything else you wanted to add about yourself and how awesome you were?
No, I think you said it pretty well. Thank you.
All right, let me see. I just want to give you a heads up about the class tonight. We are going to record and share this out on Facebook and perhaps YouTube as well. If you can, put your questions into the chat. So if you do unmute during the session, you might be caught on the recording. And we will have a section at the end for Q&A where we can stop the recording. You can turn off your cameras. If you have more questions after the fact, jot down my email right there, director@South King Tools, and we are going to have a few more of these repair sessions. So I'm excited that this is our first one. It's easy to test things out on people that you know are really reliable, like my husband. So, all right. This is the meat of the class here. We're going to talk about some of the stringed instruments, basic principles, the common instruments that we're going to kind of cover today on restringing, the anatomy of the instruments, and then the demonstration of restringing, kind of maybe out of order. Some things kind of overlap. So we'll talk about some maintenance tips and a summary, and then I'll open it up to a Q&A because I know there's a lot of specialization when it comes to these instruments. So without further ado, I promised him I would make this seamless and painless, but I don't know if that's the case. Here we go. All right, now you have to name all of these right now, John.
Stringed instruments.
Great. There we go. Perfect. Yeah. So there's a ton of different stringed instruments, of course, and they date back. I think the one you were talking about earlier, what's the one in the corner on the right-hand side? It's the one with the bow in between the strings.
Oh, the air hoop?
Yes. Yeah, I think there's some of those down there too. But we are going to talk about some of the more common ones today. So on your screen, you have electric guitars, acoustic guitars. There's a violin that will just kind of be the same as some of the nylon strings, and then your ukulele. So, all right. You want to demonstrate, or do you want me to go back to any of these other topics first?
Well, I think so. The first thing here is just talking about the common instruments that we're going to cover today, which is mainly the guitar. That's probably the most common instrument these days. Although the ukulele is catching up to it. Violin. There are some others, but basically, yeah. As far as stringed instruments, today we're going to go over steel string guitar and nylon string guitar because they are quite different as far as the restringing process goes. As far as well, should we just jump right to sort of the anatomy here, or?
Yeah. Do you want me to show some of those close-ups that you had?
Well, I actually have a few other. I mean, I have some of those instruments, but we'll yeah. Okay. So these are sort of more a little bit more uncommon types of bridges. And so I'm going to actually flip the guitar around here so we can look at the bridge on this guitar.
I'm gonna stop sharing then so we can get your full up close. Is that okay?
Sure. All right. I think we can see that pretty well there. Okay, so this is a standard bridge on a steel string acoustic guitar. This part, the dark brown part, is the bridge. And this little white part, if you can see that, is actually called the saddle. And then these are the bridge pins. On the photo that was just up a second ago was a different type of bridge. It's less common these days, still available, and it's called floating bridge. So this is fixed in place so that the guitar is in tune with itself. It's placed and glued at the manufacturer. Floating bridge that was pictured earlier is something that moves around and is just held down by the tension of the strings. So then the next part we'll look at here is the top part of the guitar, and we'll go here. Pretty much all the parts that we're discussing right now are all the parts that are going to be involved in the restring. We're not even really going to go over the neck or the body too much because that's not something that really concerns us today. But so up at the top of the guitar here, this is the headstock. These are the tuning machines, as they're called, or tuning pegs sometimes. And there are a couple of different kinds. These type are called machine tuners. They're geared. These are sealed. It's a little hard to see inside here, but there's a gear mechanism inside, and it makes it much easier to tune. The violin and some ukuleles, they have what's called friction tuners, and those literally are just a peg that goes through and it turns at a 1-to-1 ratio. So one turn all the way around of the peg is one turn all the way around. These have I think they're a 16-to-1. So you have to turn this dial 16 times for this post to turn once, making it much easier to fine tune your instrument. The next part here that's gonna be involved in the restringing, sort of, is the nut here. This is glued in place and isn't really going to affect the restringing, but you do want to make sure that the strings are seated properly inside that. The other little thing here, in case anyone was wondering, this is the cover for what's called the truss rod. That's in a lot of instruments, mainly steel string instruments, to adjust the playability of the neck. So if you'll hang on a second, I'm going to grab a different guitar nylon string that's right here handy, and we will look at some of the differences. So as we start up top here, we've got, as you can see, a whole different thing going on. So we still have these tuning machines that have a very similar ratio, 16:1. But you can see there are these plastic pegs on the inside. And this is sort of a traditional setup for a nylon string guitar. Other than that, everything's pretty much the same. Still have the nut, a little bigger on this, but it's pretty much the same thing. And then we'll flip it around and see the bridge. It is similar, but also a little bit different. So same thing here. This is the bridge, and this little white part is the saddle. This is just sort of a little aesthetic addition to it. But you'll notice no bridge pins in this. So the strings are actually tied on a nylon string guitar, as opposed to going down inside the body on the steel string.
Hey, John.
Yes.
There was a question in the chat about the acoustic guitar bridge pin was loose and it kept coming out.
Yes. Okay.
How can that be fixed?
That is a pretty common problem. And really what's happening is, so it's sort of deceiving. Let's see here. Okay, I will answer it here. It popped up on the screen for me.
Christian asked that one, but yeah, there you go.
Okay, so what is a sort of common misunderstanding about these bridge pins is that they are somehow holding the string in place. And they are sort of, but they're not doing it in the way that you would think. What they are doing is the string goes inside the body, and then the peg acts as a wedge so that the string will not come out. So the easiest way to keep it in there is to push down on it and pull up on the string at the same time so that you can create a tighter wedge. Ultimately, right now, pretty often you could pop out the bridge pin, and the string at the end has a little ball, and that ball is actually curled around the inside. So theoretically, not always, but theoretically, you could pull the bridge pin out and have the string still be in there. But once the instrument is up to tension, once the string is up to tension, it should stay in there, even if it is very loose. So you might have to push it back in or hold it a couple of times until you have the string up to tension. But there are different sizes, but I don't think that is the issue. It's unless you've lost all the bridge pins and replaced them with others, the ones that came with it will fit it. It's just a matter of wedging that string in there.
Can they be like worn down over time? Is that maybe part of a problem?
They do wear down over time, but what happens when they wear down is because basically with the guitar, all guitars that are steel string, there is a constant battle going on between steel and wood, and we always know who wins that battle.
Right.
So what happens is, it's not that the hole gets larger, certainly not from the plastic. When the hole gets larger, it's the string that is actually wearing a groove into the inside of the bridge, but that will not affect the bridge pin. So yeah, I think what does it say here? Yeah.
That it's the hole, it's too loose and it was probably worn out. So what's the usual remedy for the deterioration of the wood from there? Is it?
Well, I mean, they do make slightly larger bridge pins, but generally the oversized bridge pins will be far too large. I've had many instruments where as I'm restringing it, the bridge pin keeps popping back up. Just keep holding it in place until it gets wedged in there, and it will stay. If you try and get larger bridge pins to fit in there, oversized ones as they call it, odds are they will be too large. Generally, oversized are made for specific instruments, like maybe a gypsy jazz guitar. There's a few other styles of guitars that would take larger bridge pins.
Well, let's come back to that question and discussion too, because maybe that is something we could take a look at. But I don't want to stop you from the progress of the restringing. I know it's a thing. Do you have the bridge pins are tapered? I take it, and then there's.
They are, and I will loosen the strings on this, and we'll start getting ready for our restring here. Example, are out of the way. Okay, so the next thing is we'll go over the basic tools that you'll need for the restring. So one of these is a very handy thing to have. This is just a string winder, very simple. This pocket is made to go right over the tuning machine, whether it is a steel string or a nylon string. And we're not going to leave out the bass guitar because that's actually the instrument I play. This little notch here that's easily seen, there's a little notch in there. That has a couple of uses. One of them is for oversized tuning machines, like on a bass. So this will still fit with that. The other thing that this tool is handy for is that little notch, once again, helps to pop out the bridge pins. So really, you're only going to need this, and then also to trim the strings, a basic pair of wire cutters. Small ones don't work as well as the large ones. I guess it's the amount of torque. But that's really all that you're going to need. And then, of course, a tuner. And this is what I'd recommend. The Snark clip-on tuner works off the vibrations of the instruments. So it will tune any instrument. Okay, so the first thing to do in restringing, no more questions, Caroline, to make sure I'm not going too fast here.
Nope, you're good.
The first thing to do that I like to do, well, you gotta loosen all the strings first. So we're gonna take this and I'll demonstrate here using my hand. And that was pretty quick. And then I'm going to do another one here using this string winder so you can see how much faster it goes. Very quick. And this is much needed when it comes to stringing the instrument as opposed to de-stringing is what we're doing right now. It's a little habit that I have in plucking the string before I detune it. Part of it is that I like the sound. And the other part, I see a question and I will answer it in a second. The other part is that at my job, I'm restringing all the time, and I often don't look to make sure that people have strung it right. And we'll get to exactly what right means. And so if someone has strung it wrong and I start to detune it, I could actually be tuning it up, cause the string to snap, and someone could get hurt. So all right, so the question, one string at a time to maintain tension on the neck. No, you don't need to do that. That's not an issue. You don't need to change all the strings at once. You can do them one at a time. It's not really helpful to do them one at a time, but I think what you're getting at is more if you break a string, and you just put the one string on, and yes, that's totally fine. One string at a time is a little more complicated than just taking all the strings off and putting them all on. Because ultimately, we are still putting them on one string at a time because we can only control the tension of one string at a time. So I hope that answers your question there. Some guitars, just as a little side note to this, one string at a time, we talked briefly about the floating bridge. Now that bridge, because it's not fixed, it's almost more helpful to change the strings one at a time, unless you mark off the position first, because the guitar will not stay in tune with itself if the bridge is in the wrong spot. I can go over that briefly if anyone is interested in the intonation, as it's called, of an instrument. Won't take too much time, but basically, so from the very first note that can be struck on any string, all the way up to the 12th fret, those 12 notes are tuned by these. After that, after the 12th fret, that's the end of an octave. The next fret up, the 13th fret, is the same note as the first fret. From the 12th fret up, all of those notes, whether they are in tune or not, is determined by where the bridge is fixed. And in this case, the bridge and the saddle. So if you have the bridge too far forward or too far back, the guitar, as you go up the neck, will start to become, the notes will be flat or they'll be sharp of what they're supposed to be. So the whole point in explaining that is sometimes people go, well, I don't want to mess with the positioning on my floating bridge instrument, like a violin would be very much one of these things. So then you should change the strings one at a time. Otherwise, you're going to have to deal with a whole other process of intonating the instrument. Okay, so back to taking the strings off. So what I normally do is I normally take so that there is so little tension on the strings that they don't really make a note anymore. They're really floppy and they don't produce a note. Then, just to make things easier, clean up, I'll flip this around for a second. All right. Then I cut all the strings. And then I'm going to end up having two sets of strings or old strings to deal with. The short ones, which are easy to deal with, and the long ones, which I'll wrap up and I'll show you how to do that so that you don't have a bunch of metal spaghetti coming out of the trash can. Okay, so here is our handy string winder and also our bridge pin remover. So you can pop this thing right underneath. You really don't even have to use much force. It's a little bit of a wrenching action, but really you're just getting it underneath and it will come right up. So as you can see, as this comes up, it's loose. It does not stick in there by itself. If I put this in without the string in there and I turn this guitar upside down, this bridge pin's coming right out. So the wedging part is really just between the string and the bridge pin. Bridge pin won't stay in by itself. We've got a little bit of wear. I've had this guitar for a while. And so let's see, I have to change some angles really quick here because I want to show this. I'm not sure if you'll be able to see it, but next to the bridge pin, there is a little groove that has been worn by the string. The string is slowly eating away at the bridge.
Can you tilt it just a little further towards the camera? Like, well, no, still can't really see it. There we go.
All right.
Oh yeah, there.
Now you can see that line, right? Okay, so that line, that's not stock. That's not from the factory. That's just over time, it has cut into the wood. This is a pretty soft wood. This is rosewood. So it's one of the softer tone woods. And that is what happens far more often than what we were talking about earlier with the bridge pin hole being worn out. Because like I said, this is just in and out. It's very, very loose, but that's how it's supposed to be. So we'll continue taking these out.
Can that get worn down to the point that like the bridge pin won't hold the string in? Like it'll just kind of like it cuts in?
No, because so the bridge pin here is tapered. If we can get close enough to see what's going on there.
Yeah.
And it actually has it's a little hard to see, but there's a little groove down the center of it. It's actually cut away. Maybe this is a little better angle. Go
Yeah.
over here. So you can see that how it's kind of grooved, but none of which has anything to do with the line that I've demonstrated that the string had cut in. That's separate from it, and anything that's going to stop the bridge pin from staying in is just going to be inside this hole. So unless something has happened to sort of ream this out, it's just going to have to be, you got to wedge it just right. So probably not that the hole is worn out. It's just that it's functioning a little different than you might think it's supposed to. And we might run into that when we go to restring. We might have some of these bridge pins pop up. So hopefully they will do that, so we can cross that bridge and answer some questions. Another thing that's good to have when doing all this, I like to have what I don't have here, but that's okay. I like to have a small little dish, maybe a little Tupperware thing, to keep bridge pins and other things in, so that I don't lose track of them. All right, we've got all the strings removed from the bridge, all about the same length, short little bits here. This is easy to get rid of, no problem. All right, I'm going to go back up top.
Hey, John, I might unpin your face so everybody can focus on the guitar while you're doing that. Just so if you want to talk to people face to face, just let me know and I'll read
Sure.
but I'll
Yeah,
stop
you
when
can
just,
you do the production you think needs to happen. That's better.
There we go.
Okay, so.
Not that you're not important, but the guitar is more important.
No. Yeah, this is what we're here about. All right, so take all these off of here. These first 3 wound strings, actually the first 4 wound strings, are only kind of dangerous. The little ends are a little sharp and can poke you, but it's really this one that can get you, because it's just about the size of a needle, and it does have some good tension on it. So you got to kind of be careful when it gets to the end like that. I like to grab a hold of it with a pair of these and pull it out of the hole that way, because yeah, that smarts when that sticks you. This one's not so bad, not a lot of tension, so it's easy to pull off. Okay, so then you got all the strings. I like to put them all together and just make a little circle out of it and just pass it through itself. So you've got this nice little disposable wrap of string. This isn't going to pop out like spaghetti. All right, so strings. So this is the brand that I like, but there are many brands out there. Dario, which is this. Some people say Diodario. Doesn't really matter, tomato. There's Ernie Ball makes good strings. Okay, I see a question here. What gauge strings? Okay, standard gauge strings for a steel string acoustic guitar are going to be just what we have here about. Generally, it is 12 to 54. These are 12 to 53, pretty close. And that actually is technically they are 0.12 to 0.53, and that is millimeters. That's standard. You know, normally here, I'm gonna answer, I see another question here. The problem with these strings is that they're not just steel, they are actually a phosphor bronze coating over a steel core. Except for the high strings, those are generally an alloy of steel and nickel. So, you know, that's a question maybe for Jeanette or Amanda, because
I know that, yeah, I know like wire cable cannot be recycled, but yeah, that's a good Jeanette question. And I don't know if she had to step away. What do you think, Jeanette?
Sorry, I was trying to unmute. Yes, you can just recycle it, but it would have to go down to a scrap metal recycler or come to one of the electronics recycling events, like the one we're going to have on August 14th. You just can't put them in your curbside bin for scrap metal, but otherwise they'll take them at the scrap yards.
Interesting.
Oh, that is good to know. I may look into starting to do that, because at the Trading Musician, which is where I am gainfully employed, managed that shop since 2010. We currently do not recycle strings, but we do a lot of recycling, mainly of drum hardware. We get lots of, because there's a full-line music shop. Get lots of drum stuff coming through and lots of broken drum hardware. And so we do take a trip to the scrapyard probably once every 6 months. But I don't think we realized you could do that with strings. So we will do that. Okay, so also, since we're basically, this demonstration is going to represent it's obviously representing your steel string acoustic guitar, but it's also representing your electric guitar, which is essentially the same, the nuts the same, the tuning machines, no bridge pins on an electric guitar, but generally it's much easier. There's a hole that it gets strung through either on the bridge or on the back of the body. So there's not a lot of confusion there as far as how the string goes through. And the standard gauges for electric guitars are going to be 10 to 46. These, once again, this is 12 to 53 here, but 12 to 54 is about the standard. Electric guitar is 10 to 46, a little lighter for an electric guitar. And we'll talk about nylon when we get to nylon. Okay, so I think I'm going to turn this guitar around again. We can put in. I like to put them in all at once. Not use my bridge pins here. Good. Is that nice and visible there? Okay. So this company, D'Addario, each one of the strings, they have this ball at the end. And I'm trying to demonstrate, I'm not sure if it's super visible, but these two have different colors. And each one of the strings has a different color. So you can determine what order they go in if you can't tell by the thickness, which is kind of the easier thing, I think, if you ask me, but they are color coded, so you know what order. So we've got the ball end here. I'm going to put that down inside, not very far. And we want to kind of, as we're putting the bridge pin in, the slotted side, the little sort of groove that it has, goes that, there we go. I think that's more like a little groove that's in there. That is facing the string itself. So the string is fitting right into that groove. So you put this bridge pin down in there, and I'm actually pushing that ball in right now because I don't have the string. The string isn't going in very far, just right inside. And the bridge pin is pushing that ball end down in further. And then I'm pulling up on the string and it slid into place. So now this is actually in there pretty snug. String is stuck in place. So once again, we'll do that here. Put this down in there just a little bit. Push it down with the bridge pin. Again, that slot in the string. Get down in there and pull up on the string, locking it in place. Go to the next two.
So how do you know which colors if you're not familiar with what thickness?
On the back of the package, it does have a color letting you know which color corresponds to which string.
Huh.
But they go from thicker to thinner or thinner to thicker depending on how you're looking at the instrument. So I rarely pay attention to the colors and pay attention to the thickness of the strings. It's just a little easier for me, but they added the color coding, help everybody out, I guess. So, well, I think what a lot of people do when they do this is they put the string down in, then they put the bridge pin in, and then they call it done. And I cannot stress enough how you want to force the little ball end down with the bridge pin, and then once it's seated, hold on to it and yank on it, and it actually gave quite a bit. So it is now wedged in there, and that's gonna help keep your bridge pins in place. Last two strings here. Also, I don't see anyone asking this question, but even though the strings are different thicknesses, the bridge pins are not different thicknesses, and the little groove inside them is not a different thickness either. It is not necessary. A little harder to grab a hold of these plain strings because they are not wound at all and they are just super slick. So it's a little harder to grab a hold of those to create good tension down here. It can be done. Let's see, I'm having a little bit of a problem with this one. I can feel it wants to pop back out, and so got it wedged there. All right, we've got all of our strings in there now. And now we're gonna flip the guitar around and do the important part. All right. So, first thing you do here is you got the tapered end of the string, or the winding stops. You put that through the little eyelet on your tuning machine.
Why did you just twist it again?
Oh, to straight, so to straighten up the hole. I mean, you can go any angle, whatever angle the hole happens to be at, but it is a little easier to just go straight through. Gotcha. Start it off. Okay. So then what you want to do, I'm going to change this angle a little bit because I want to be able to see. So there's a lot of extra string here, and we want to get just the right number of wraps on this tuning machine up here. Too many, and you've got like a huge mess, and it does actually start to affect your tuning. Too little, and the angle isn't going to be quite right. So there's this thing that we call breaking angle, and that is the angle from which the string goes through the nut here and then attaches to the tuning machine here. Now, if the angle is not great enough, then you can get a buzzing on the string because it's basically not creating enough tension, and the string is flopping and rubbing up against fret, creating this buzzing sound. So you want to get good angle, and the way that you do that is by getting the proper number of wraps. So I like to leave just, I like to have the string nice and slack and be able to stick my hand underneath it. This is generally about enough. But if you want to measure out, you can hold the string pretty tight, and there's generally enough extra string to reach up to the next tuning machine. Either way, push that back to there. That happens to be just about enough for a hand to go underneath it, or holding the same spot, pull it up, and it goes just about to the second tuning. That's about the right amount that you're going to need for every single string. So once we've got that there, I am holding the string in place, and now I'm going to take my little tool and I'm going to start to turn this counterclockwise. And what you want to do, the string is always going to want to start on the inside and wrap to the outside. On this side, on the bass side, and also on the treble side. So that when you tune away from yourself, when you turn this tuning machine on either side counterclockwise, the pitch of the string and the tension goes up. So I'm turning it counterclockwise, and I've got it around just almost a full revolution here. And for that first revolution, we want the excess string that we're going to continue wrapping to go above the string that is coming through the center eyelet. So the first wrap goes above. Now we're going to come around, and now we've gone 1.5 turns. And so now I like to take this little extra bit of string and bend it up so it doesn't flop as much and it stays out of our way. So from this point on, what we're going to do is we're going to have the rest of the wraps go below the eyelet, so that basically we're sandwiching in the excess string and holding it in place so it doesn't become loose. So now we've got, as you kind of see there, maybe, probably not, but we've got one above and the rest of them below. Okay, so now what I like to do is I kind of create this little S shape in tension. And what I mean by that is I'm pulling on the back end of the string away from the bridge, or away from the bridge down there. Pulling on it this direction. But I'm also pulling on it from this direction, from the nut. So I'm creating tension in 2 different places. And this is so that I don't end up with what just happened here. Kind of hard to see. My wraps started to get a little screwy because I let up on the tension for a second. I'm going to back up and maintain good tension so that we can have nice, pretty wraps. And the reason that we're going down on the rest of these wraps is to create that breaking angle that I talked about earlier. All right, so there's one string on, and you can probably see there that the string is wedged between the 2 wraps, so it's not going to go anywhere. Just about the right number of wraps for the low strings. We'll do more on the high strings, but we'll talk about that when we get there. So on to the next string, same kind of thing. We'll straighten this out. String this through like threading a needle. Same amount of distance there. We've got just about a hand's worth of extra string. And we're going counterclockwise above. Bend the string to get it out of the way. And then going to go counterclockwise, and the rest of the wine's going below the eyelet.
Hey, John, I just want to let you know it's about 7:04, and I just want to be cognizant of everybody's time.
Yeah.
We have small hunger too. And I just wanted to give you a chance if you wanted to cover some other things and leave a little time, probably leave 3 or 4 minutes for Q&A.
Sure. So we'll move on to the nylon string, and I'll try and go through things a little bit quicker with that. But that's basically what's going on here with the steel string. The only difference when you get to the higher strings is you want to have close to double 5 wraps probably, because the string is unwound and it can slip a little bit easier. But everything else about it is the same. And still, we don't have any bridge pins popping up, but they they still could. So we're gonna switch gears here and go over to the nylon strings.
And we did say 7:30, so I guess we have more time than I thought, but still want to be cognizant if there was questions that we can cover for people and that kind of thing. So
yeah. Well, this one is a little more complicated anyway. So the first thing is that these tuning machines are on the back of the guitar. They don't stick out to the side. So they're a little more difficult to get to with your string winder. You basically have to turn the instrument or do it by hand. And you hear how slow it goes this way. Actually, at work, we actually have a little driver bit that's the exact size of tuning machines. We use a little drill for the nylon string and just take way less time. I'm going to try and get these strings off here as quick as possible so that we can go through the restringing process, because it is a little bit more involved than nylon string guitar.
now, why do you hit the notes when you're unwinding? What was
Part
that
of
again?
part of it is just force of habit. I've been doing it so long, and the sort of a nice sound. But it's mainly because when I restring instruments for other folks, as I went through on the last guitar, saying that you need to have all the strings being wrapped counterclockwise. That's not always the case. People will put them on clockwise, and as I think I'm de-stringing it or loosening the tension, I'm actually increasing the tension, and the string could just snap. A ball end could go flying, or it could poke someone in the eye, and so it's just sort of a little safety precaution. Even with my own instruments, which I know are strung the right way, I still just sort of do it out of habit. All right, so we're going to do the same thing here. I don't need to flip it around to show you that I'm cutting the strings, but I will flip it around in a second. Demonstrate the, now, this guitar I actually brought from the Trading Musician, because my nylon string doesn't need restringing, and I thought it would be a waste of strings to do that. So this is, take note of how these are done. I'm not sure if I can get in any closer. This is wrong, 100% wrong. This is going to make things a bit more difficult to get off. I can do it, but this is incorrect. But
You
really,
need a seam ripper or something.
rules were meant to be broken. The person that owned this guitar made their own rules as to how to do this, and it worked for them, but it is making it far more difficult to get these strings off. I've seen people literally tie strings on the top, just about everything that you can think of. Someone doesn't know how to do it, and they make something up. So this is incorrect, and normally you do not have to use wire cutters to take nylon strings off. Almost done here. So this is, it's more time consuming with a nylon string, but it's not really more difficult. So they look like they're metal on the outside. They are actually metal wrapped, but the core of all these strings is still nylon. You cannot use nylon strings on a steel string and vice versa. The instruments are made for strings with a certain amount of tension. So if you put steel strings on a nylon string, you could really hurt the neck. And if you put nylon strings on a steel string, generally it's just going to buzz, 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 because there's not enough tension. So now up here to this whole mess, this is not incorrect, but so these have a little plastic peg. It's very similar, except the post is going horizontally, I guess, depending on how you look at the instrument, but it's going the opposite direction. But it's the same principle. You're still putting the string through the little hole and trying to get the proper number of wraps. Now, just to sort of save time a little bit, I'm going to sort of not take all these strings off, not eat up everyone's time, and I will start show you how to put nylon strings on. All right, now these aren't color coded because there's no ball at the end of them. These strings are the strings that you tie on. Once again, same brand, the Dario. They're called the Pro Arte classical strings. And they don't come in different gauges. They come in different tensions. The strings are made to be more or less dense to kind of simulate different tensions. Okay, the nylon strings, there's no ball end, but there is a proper end that goes towards the bridge. And each one of these, the ends are seemingly the same, but one of them is far thinner. This is much more tension. This doesn't have the nylon core at the end, and that is so that you can tie this on. Makes it much easier. So go back to the bottom. So what you're going to do is there are these little tiny holes in the bridge behind the saddle. String this through, and then you're going to make a little bit of a loop. Go around here and make it a little bit of a loop, and you are literally just wrapping it through itself. And now I've done this backwards because I'm doing it backwards. It doesn't really matter, but it does make it easier. Is that correct? Sorry, I'm doing this in a mirror. Yes, that's correct. Okay. So now that we have this loop through here, for the bass strings like this, you really only have to do it once through. You can do it twice if you like. But the reason that I changed the direction, said I was going the wrong direction, is that this little extra tail of string that's left here, this is going to go and be wrapped inside the next loop that we make, so that when we're done with this, all the strings are, the excess is all nice and tapered up underneath, and you don't have all this excess sort of stuff sticking out. So this is tied through itself. This is not going to come loose. Now we're going to go back up to the top. So inside this peg, and the easiest way to do this, there's a couple of different ways to do this, but the easiest way to do this is to take the string and thread it through like a needle. You go through and pull about the same thing. You want that hand's worth of tension. Take the string and wrap it around back to, my hand out of the way, back to this exact same hole where you just stuck it through, and run the string through a second time, if it'll fit. It doesn't always fit with the wrapped string. And this one feels like,
And is kind of blocking the view, but I know it's hard.
I'm trying to, well, because I'm going to have to do
Oh,
this.
I see. You wrap it back through kind of the eye of the.
Yeah, and so normally the hole is big enough for you to wrap it back through and go through the eye again. But in this instance, the hole is not large enough to do that. So we're going to do the second method, which works just as well and might be even a little bit better. Okay. It's just not quite as easy. So what you do is you've got the string through, and let me see if I can demonstrate. It goes all the way down. It's just all the way through. I'm keeping this tension on here. And now we're going to start to turn the thing same direction, counterclockwise. And when we've come back through and we have this excess of string that we push through, what we're going to do now is all of these new wraps that we're going to make, they're going to go on top of that string. You can decide which direction you want to go. Generally, I like to go from the inside of the hole to the outside. So you're going towards the outside of the instrument or towards the tuning machine. So now as I wrap, this excess is going to wrap over the extra bit that I have sticking out here. So I've got to hold it down, and essentially, yeah, all that's happening is the rest of the string is holding down the excess string that I put through the eyelet. I gotta turn this a little bit so I can do this a little quicker, because it does take a while with a nylon string. Is there, I think these might even be a greater ratio. They might be 1 to 32. So you really have to go over it several times.
Oh, the rotations. Yeah, that's a lot of rotations.
Yeah, and it is a lot easier. This is the most difficult position I've ever had to restring it before. Sorry, you can't see exactly what's happening, but this is the only way really to. I'll demonstrate after we get it on here.
You're doing a good job. It looks good. And as much as we can see. Now, you said that the nylon string is similar to what other instrument would have a nylon string?
The ukulele also has nylon strings, and you tie them at the end in the exact same fashion. I have a ukulele here that I will show in just a second, but basically I'm not sure. Let me see if I can get this back around enough and show you that what has happened here is that all of these subsequent winds that happened after it went through the hole, they are on top of the extra string. So they are pushing down and creating tension and holding the string in place. So you do that for each one. That you can't do the easy way, which is running it through, making a circle, and running it back through the exact same direction. That is what I would recommend doing on the high strings, the unwound strings, because they're super slick and they are not likely to hold without dozens of wraps, or at least 10, unless you put it through the hole twice. It's essentially then being held from two different directions. I'm going to grab a ukulele real quick so I can demonstrate and show that. The same, basically, but on a smaller scale. So here's our little uke. And we've got the same thing down here. We've got a smaller bridge and smaller saddle, but it's the same as we just were talking about here with the nylon string. The string goes through and wraps through itself. This is several times because these strings are all unwound, which means they don't have any wraps on them. They're very slick. And if you don't have enough wraps, when you start to get the string up to tension, it will just unfurl right out of this, unless you have, this is probably 5 or 6 wraps through. Now this one, I did not restring, but as you can see, someone clipped all of these. And what I would have done is I would have left the excess string on each one of these. Let me get a pointer. I know, I'll use an old. I would have left the excess on each one of these and then wrapped it into the next knot. So we had a nice little clean looking restring up there. These tuning machines on this uke are also geared tuning machines. And you can see now the other ones I showed, they were sealed. This, you can actually see the gear. So as I turn this, I have to turn this 16 times for this post to go around once. The other style that you're going to find on ukuleles is what they call, how do you, let's see, sorry, I'm reading a question here. How do you stop uke pegs from slipping? So that is The other kind of tuning machine that I was getting to, and those are called friction tuners. And they're really old style, are literally just little pieces of wood shaped similar to the bridge pin, but with a big head on it like a tuning machine. Stuffed through, you wrap the string, and this is what you get on a violin. And it is 1-to-1. You put the string through and you turn it a little bit, you turn it one whole rotation. The modern versions, those have a tiny little flathead screw generally in the back of them. And you turn the instrument over, they have a little flathead screw, and that is what actually tightens the peg in its own place. So you can take that and crank up the tension a little bit, and that will help to keep those ukulele pegs in place if you don't have the machine tuner. One other little point I want to point out here. Yes, I'm reading the question here too. Yes, chalk or also rosin. There are several different things that you can use to keep them tight if you have the style like a violin or a cello that are just literally pegs with a hole. If they have a little screw on them, you can increase the tension that way, and the rosin or any of those other things not going to be necessary. But what I wanted to demonstrate here is this is the number of wraps that's required. This is quite a few. We did only 2 or 3 on the steel string, and this here we've got 7 or 8 wraps because these strings are pure nylon and they're very slick. If you don't do this number of wraps, it's going to come out of tune. The string is going to slip and potentially could come all the way off. Yeah, so that's basically, this is the ukulele is pretty much a little version of a nylon string guitar. Bridge is the same, the tying the strings on is the same. Should I go back and do a little bit more on the nylon string guitar? I don't have the time.
Yeah, it's about 7:22. What was I gonna ask? Oh, ukulele strings. Do they come in different? They are kind of like nylon strings. They come in different tensions and.
And they generally do not. They generally only come in the size of the instrument. So with ukuleles, you've got the size at which that I just had here. That's called a soprano uke. And then the next size up is a concert. And then there is a tenor, which is larger, and then a baritone is the biggest. With most instruments, those distinctions denote a different pitch, like a baritone sax, tenor sax, alto sax. Those are different pitches. With the ukulele, that's not the case. They're all tuned exactly the same. It's just the shape of the body. So the strings are different lengths is the only difference. They don't come in different gauges or thicknesses or tensions.
But you could probably, and that would be a pretty bad mistake if you got the wrong size for your ukulele.
Only if you got wrong. If you have a concert size and you got soprano strings, they wouldn't be long enough. But if you have a soprano like this ukulele and you got any of the other sizes of strings, they would just be too long. So you just have more that you would cut off. There is the baritone. Let me just say that as well. The baritone ukulele is different. There are different strings. It is tuned different. It's actually the same tuning as the 4 highest strings on a guitar. So it's actually kind of a different instrument. Yeah, so I don't know if it's only a few minutes. Should we do some kind of, is there any other questions anyone has?
Hey, John, Dave here. I've got a question. Actually,
Yes.
I got a couple of them.
Sure.
The first one was for steel string guitars, the B string and the high E. Do you is it worth it to loop it through the eye of the machine tune or the tuning machine to keep it from slipping, or if you is enough winds enough to keep the friction?
Oh, yeah, it's enough winds is definitely Yeah, you do not need to loop that through a second time. If you generally, it's not quite double, but in the neighborhood of double. You get anywhere between 5 and 7 winds on the high strings, and it's not necessary to loop it through. It's not going to slip out.
Oh, great. And then one other question, and this is kind of an odd one, but if a person wanted to tune a guitar or a violin lower, almost like making a viola out of a violin or something, can you just make the strings looser to make the lower tone, or do you actually need thicker strings like a baritone guitar?
It depends on how low you want to go. So you can go down a little bit, similar to the way people sort of do some basic drop tunings or slight alternate tunings with the guitar. But if you're going to go very far down, you will have to get larger strings that already afford that much more tension. You can go down as low as you want, but it becomes very difficult because when the string is tuned that low, it's very floppy and it's very hard to keep it in tune. You can literally bend it with ease and have it completely out of tune. The other thing is, often when you start getting larger strings, you'll have to make adjustments to the guitar, making the nut slots larger and adjusting the tension in the neck, or the truss rod rather, too.
Right.
So when you're talking about violas and violins, that's a bit more, there's no truss rods in those. And once you adjust the nut, a violin nut is a lot more costly than a guitar nut. So,
oh wow,
coming back from that, not that it's necessarily more work, but it's a whole different culture with violins, violas, cellos, and they tend to charge a pretty penny for their work. Yeah. Hopefully that answers your question.
Sure did. Thank you.
We didn't get too much to like tuning because we were doing a lot of that. Did you want to maybe touch on that? If
you get yourself a good snark tuner here, this is the snark tuner here, and this was not provided for free. This is not an endorsement, a paid endorsement. Just, these are wonderful little tuners. They work off of the vibrations in the instrument. It's actually picking up the notes in my voice now as I'm speaking. And
you tell me that you were watching something the other day, because we live together, that you were watching something about different artists tuned their guitars to different frequencies.
Well, the basic tuning that's been decided on, believe it or not, roughly only since about the 50s, the 1950s, is 440 hertz being the middle or the basic note that everything's tuned to, and that is an A. So there's lots of other you can tune, and this tuner will actually, it's come stock set at 440 to tune an A note, and this is not attention. But yes, it has all kinds of settings inside of it. You can change it and go and make your A, instead of 440, you can make it 436 or 446 or whatever number you want to dial in. Using this tuner is very simple. It's chromatic, which means that it just recognizes the note that it hears. It doesn't, they have some tuners that are specifically made for guitar, will only give you those 6 notes, or for you, but this will give you any note, so you do have to know what it should be tuned to. This will work on any instrument: guitar, cello, violin, air hu, whatever instrument that you want to tune. And it's pretty simple. You just want to, if it's still in the red, it's telling you the note is flat, and if it gets into that yellow, then it's telling you that note is sharp. So we want this to be E, so we're pretty close there. Last little note on this: these do have to be stretched out, and it takes a lot more stretching with nylon string than it does with steel string, but this should be done. takes time to figure out exactly how hard you can pull on these to work them and not snap them. But it does need to happen. And so we were up to tension before, and now we are flat a step and a half. So the stretching has definitely worked. All right, we're back up. I'll do some more stretching, and I can almost guarantee we'll go back down again. Step and a half. When we restring a nylon string at the Trading Musician, it's almost double of what we charge to restring a steel string because of the amount of time it takes to stretch these, wrap the strings, tie the strings. It's more labor intensive, but it's not necessarily more difficult. It just takes more time. Yeah, so I think
Yeah, I think we're really good on time. If anybody else had any questions, feel free to unmute. I'll go ahead and pause the recording, but thanks, honey. Thank you for doing a good job and a good presentation. And we might have to get I know tuning equipment can be rather expensive, but maybe that would be something that the tool library could lend out, at least to folks maybe when they're starting out.
these are $20 retail.
Oh, never mind then. I guess that's not that expensive.
Nope. These little things here are about $5, and I know now that they do have one at the tool library because I've donated one, and I'll donate one of these too. So we'll have that on hand for whatever instrument that you need.
Wow, thank you. Because I would have probably just taken one of yours. So that's great. All right, I'll pause the recording now.